failure was so total that nothing was left to do but go back to the laboratory and test again the disappearing fragment, left carefully encased in lead. The fragment lasted a week, at the end of which nothing of value had been learned of it. When it had gone, no residue was left behind, and at the time the professors felt scarcely sure they had indeed seen with waking eyes that cryptic vestige of the fathomless gulfs outside, that lone weird message from other universes and other realms of matter, force, and entity. As was natural, the Arkham papers made much of the incident with its collegiate sponsoring, and sent reporters to talk with Nahum Gardner and his family. At least one Boston daily also sent a scribe, but Nahum quickly became a kind of local celebrity. He was a lean, genial person of about 50, living with his wife and 3 sons on the pleasant farmstead in the valley. He and Emmy exchanged visits frequently, as did their wives, and Emmy had nothing but praise for him after all these years. He seemed slightly proud of the notice his place had attracted. And talked often of the meteorite in the succeeding weeks. That July and August were hot, and Nahum worked hard in his haying in the 10-acre pasture across Chapman's Brook, his rattling wearing deep ruts in the shadowy lanes between. The labor tired him more than it had in other years, and he felt that age was beginning to tell on him. Then fell the time of fruit and harvest. The pears and apples were slowly ripened, and Nahum vowed that his orchards were prospering as never before. The fruit was growing to phenomenal size and unwanted gloss, and in such abundance that extra barrels were ordered to handle the future crop. But with the ripening came sore disappointment for all that gorgeous array of specious lusciousness. Not one single jot was fit to eat. Into the fine flavor of the pears and apples had not crept a stealthy bitterness and sickishness. So that even the smallest of bites induced a lasting disgust. It was the same with the melons and the tomatoes, and Nahum sadly saw that his entire crop was lost. Quick to connect events, he declared the meteorite had poisoned the well, and thanked heaven that most of the other crops were in an upland lot along the road. Winter came early and was very cold. Abby saw Nahum less often than usual, and observed that he had begun to look worried. The rest of his family, too, seemed to have grown taciturn, and were far from steady in their church-going on their attendance at the various social events of the countryside. For this reserve or melancholy, no cause could be found, though all the household confessed now and then to poor health and the feeling of vague disquiet. And Nahum himself gave the most definite statement of anyone when he had said that he had was disturbed about certain footprints in the snow. They were the usual winter prints of red squirrels, white rabbits, and foxes, when the brooding farmer processed to see something not quite right about their nature and arrangement. He was never specific, but it appeared to think that they were not as characteristic of the anatomy of the habits in squirrels and rabbits and foxes as they ought to be. Emmy listened without interest to this talk until one night when he drove past Nahum's house in his sleigh on the way back from Clark's Corners. There had been a moon, and a rabbit had run across the road, and the leaps of that rabbit were longer than any of Ammy's or his horse liked. The latter, indeed, had almost run away when brought up by a firm rein. Thereafter, Ammy gave Nahum Tales more respect, and wondered why the Gardner dog seemed so cowed and quivering every morning. they had it developed, nearly lost the spirit to bark. In February, the McGregor boys from Meadow Hill were out shooting woodchucks, and not far from the Gardner place bagged a very peculiar specimen. The proportions of its body had seemed slightly altered in a queer way impossible to describe, while its face had taken on an expression which no one ever saw in a woodchuck before. The boys were genuinely frightened and threw the thing away at once, so that only their grotesque tales of it ever reached the people of the countryside. But shying away from horses near Nahum's house had now become an acknowledged thing, and all the basis for a cycle to whispered legend was taking fast form. People vowed that the snow melted faster around Nahum's than it did around anywhere else. In early March, there was an all discussion in Potter's General Store at the Clark's Corners. Stephen Rice had driven past Gardner's in the morning and had noticed the skunk cabbages growing up through the woods, through the mud by the woods across the road. Never were such things of such size seen before, and they held strange colors that could not be put into any words. Their shapes were monstrous, and the horse had snorted an odor which struck Stephen as wholly unprecedented. That afternoon, the several persons drove past to see the abnormal growth, and all agreed that plants of that kind ought to never to sprout in a healthy world. The bad fruit of all the fall before was freely mentioned, and it went from mouth to mouth that there was poison in Nahum's ground. Of course, it was the meteorite, and remembering how strange the men from the college had found that stone to be, several farmers spoke about the matter to them. One day they paid Nahum a visit, but having no love of wild tales and folklore, they were very conservative in what they inferred. The plants were very certainly odd, but all that skunk cabbages are more or less odd in shape and color and hue. Perhaps some mineral element from the stone had entered the soil, but would soon be washed away. And as for the footprints and frightened horses, of course this was mere country talk which such a phenomenon as the aerolite was certain to start. Would be certain to start. There's really nothing for serious men to do in cases of wild gossip, for superstitious rustics will say and believe anything. And so all through the strange days, the professor stayed awake in contempt. Only one of them, when given two vials of dust for analysis in a police job over a year and a half later, recalled that the queer color of the skunk cabbage had been very like one of the anomalous bands of light shown by the meteor fragment in the college spectroscope, and like the brittle globule found embedded in the stone from the abyss. The samples in this analysis case gave the same odd bands at first, though later they lost the property. The trees budded prematurely around Nahum's, and at night they swayed ominously in the wind. Nahum's second son, Thaddeus, a lad of 15, swore that they swayed also when there was no wind. But even the Gospels would not credit this. Certainly, however, restlessness was in the air. The entire Gardner family has developed the habit of stealthy listening, though not for any sound which they could consciously name. The listening was, indeed, rather a product of moments when consciousness seemed to have to slip away. Unfortunately, such moments increased week by week until it became common speech that something was wrong with all Nahum's folks. When the early saxifrage came out, it had another strange color, not quite like that of the sun cabbage, but plainly related and equally unknown to anyone who saw it. Nahum took some blossoms to Arkham and showed them to the editor of the Gazette, but that dignitary didn't know more than write a humorous article about them, in which the dark fears of the rustic were held up to polite ridicule. It was a mistake of Nahum's to tell a stolid city man about the way the great overgrown mourning cloaks butterflies behaved in the connection with the saxifrages. April brought a kind of madness to the country folk, and began that disuse of the road past Nahum's which led to its ultimate abandonment. It was the vegetation. All the orchard trees blossomed forth in strange colors, and through the stony soil of the yard and adjacent pasturage there sprang up a bizarre growth which only a botanist could connect with the proper flora of the region. No sane, wholesome colors were anywhere to be seen except in the green grass and leafage. But everywhere, those hectic and prismatic variants of some diseased underlying primary tone without a place among the known tints of the earth. The Dutchman's breeches became a thing of sinister menace, and the bloodroots grew insolent in their chromatic perversion. Amy and the gardeners thought that most of the colors had a sort of haunting familiarity. They decided that they reminded one of the brittle globule in the meteor. Nahum plowed and sowed the 10-acre passage in the upland lot, but did nothing with the land around the house. He knew it would be of no use, and hoped that the summer's strange growths would draw all the poison from the soil. He was prepared for almost anything now, and had grown used to the sense of something near him waiting to be heard. The shunning of the house by neighbors told on him, of course, but it was told on his wife more. The boys were better off being at school each day, but they could not help being frightened by the gossip. Thaddeus, and especially sensitive youth, suffered the most. In May, the insects came, and Nahum's place became a nightmare of buzzing and crawling. Most of the creatures seemed not quite as usual in their aspects and motions, and their nocturnal habits contradicted all former experience. The gardeners took to watching at night, watching in all directions at random for something. They could not tell what. It was then that they owned that Thaddeus had been right about the trees. Miss Gardner was the next to see it from the window as she watched the swollen boughs of a maple against the moonlight sky. The boughs had surely moved, and there was no wind. It must be the sap. Strangeness had come into everything growing now. Yet it was not of Nahum's family at all who had made the next discovery. Familiarity had dulled them, and what they could not see was glimpsed by a timid windmill salesman from Bolton, who drove by one night in ignorance of the country legends. What he told in Arkham was given a short paragraph in the Gazette, and it was there that all farmers, Nahum included, saw it first. The night had been dark and the buggy lamps faint, but around the farm in the valley, which everyone knew from the account must be Nahum's, the darkness had been less thick. A dim, through distinct luminosity, seemed to inhere in all the vegetation, grass, leaves, and blossoms alike, while at one moment a detached piece of the phosphorescence appeared to stir furtively in the yard near the barn. The grass had seemed so untouched, so far untouched. And the cows were freely pastured in the lot near the house. But toward the end of May, the